Danny freaking Boyle. 28 days later, 127 hours, Slumdog Millionaire, Train Spotting, and now 28 years later. This man does not know how to miss.
In the heat of battle, he don't miss.
28 Days Later is one of the greatest zombie movies of all time. In fact, it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. And it's living proof that you don't need a huge budget to make a movie with a legacy that will last for decades. 28 Weeks Later was pretty much in the bag as soon as the success of the first movie became apparent. And as fans, we've been begging for 28 Years Later ever since the release of the sequel. Given that the first movie premiered in 2002, I was kind of hoping that 28 Years Later would stay true to its name and release in 2030. But it's crushing cinemas worldwide now, so why not revisit the franchise and take a look at what they did right and what grievous mistakes might be hiding in plain sight. For those among you who haven't seen the movie in a long time, I highly suggest you rewatch it before seeing 28 Years Later. But if you don't have the time, here's a quick recap. Jim is a bicycle courier who ended up in a traffic accident, which landed him in a coma. He wakes up in an empty hospital in London, which was, unbeknownst to him, ravaged by a viral outbreak. The virus is pretty simple. Scientists simply call it the rage virus, and it's highly contagious. You don't even have to get bit to get infected. If any infected saliva or blood gets into your mouth, eyes, or open wounds, you'll get infected all the same. The infection is very fast, unlike in most other zombie movies, and it takes less than a minute to turn you from a regular Joe to a savage monster out for blood. The infected are also unlike other zombies in most movies. We're used to slow, tumbling zombies, but it seems that turning everyone into Usain Bolt is one of the side effects of the virus. I hope you ran track in high school because boy, oh boy, you're gonna need some stamina if you're planning on surviving this. By the way, if you're only interested in the weapons found in this movie, you'll find that toward the end of the video because firearms only make an appearance in the final act of the movie. Right now, we'll be taking a look at some of the survival skills seen in the movie. Jim wakes up 20 days after the viral outbreak in desperate need of a haircut. London is completely empty, and he has no idea what's going on. He cracks open a few cold ones from the vending machine and he starts wandering around town looking for any sign of life. He kind of figures out that something catastrophic happened from a notification board with thousands of missing persons posters, but he's still unaware of the scope of what's going on. His next move is to go to a church, which is a great idea in this situation. Should you ever find yourself completely isolated from the rest of the world after waking up from a coma, the best place to look for is a hospital or set up Red Cross centers. Churches are historically known for hosting such operations during crises, so this is reasonable thinking on his part. Of course, he's chased out of the church by zombies, and that's when he meets Selena and Mark. Long story short, Mark dies, and Selena and Jim find Frank and Hannah, a father and daughter who have holed up in their apartment. This is pretty much the worst-case scenario when it comes to an emergency, especially viral outbreaks. An apartment building is crowded, difficult to close off, and you need to walk up and down a bazillion flights of stairs to get supplies. A place like London is generally a terrible spot to find yourself in when we're talking about viral outbreaks, especially something of this magnitude. You want to get out in rural areas with less population density. Another problem Frank and Hannah find themselves in is the lack of water and supplies. They spread buckets on the building's roof to collect rainwater, but that's another issue too. Rainwater isn't inherently healthy to drink because it can pick up contaminants in the atmosphere. Also, among the hundreds of buckets, I spotted a hamper. I have no idea what Frank's logic is here, but in case you didn't know, you can't collect water in a container with holes. Frank actually does something smart too, as he uses a radio to listen to service announcements. This is actually super smart, as I'm sure every prepper watching this video will agree, because radios are incredibly useful in emergency scenarios. Your cell phone is usually the first bit of communication technology to lose reception, while radios, especially the battery-powered ones, can prove more useful in the long term. The group hears a message from a military base inviting them over, and they make the decision to go. This is definitely the right decision because there's absolutely no chance they can survive cooped up in this tiny apartment for more than a few weeks. The group heads off for the military base in the morning, and on the way there, they stop by a grocery store which seems largely untouched by the outbreak. A grocery store would be the holy grail in this scenario, and I don't care what anyone says, the group's choices are great. Selena does make a good point when she tells Jim not to take anything that needs to be cooked. Your priority should be canned foods, as they have a shelf life from 2 to 5 years, depending on the type of food. You should also focus on high-calorie foods. As far as I can tell, the group gets all the right things: canned foods, medical and hygienic supplies, as well as a few bottles of alcohol and chocolate. Now, there's some talk online that Jim and Frank getting booze is a waste of valuable storage room in their tiny car, but I largely disagree with that. In the case of societal collapse, money as we know it loses value completely, and we revert to a barter system. Toilet paper is all of a sudden more valuable than jewelry, and rare commodities such as alcohol and chocolate can be traded for something more practical, such as soap, food, or clothes. Alcohol, chocolate, cigarettes, even magazines and books can become highly priced luxuries. Therefore, I think the 3 bottles of whiskey they grab can be more valuable than a dozen cans of beans. After raiding a store and paying for it, the group continues their path to salvation and make a stop at a burger place by the highway. Jim makes the very dumb decision to investigate the small restaurant on his own, while the rest of the group siphons gas from a truck. In a situation like this, no one should ever go anywhere alone. And Jim almost learns that lesson the hard way when he's jumped by an infected boy whom he fights off eventually. After that, it's smooth sailing to the military base. When the group reaches the rendezvous spot, Frank gets infected because he got mad at a bird? You're not alone in this. I don't understand his logic here either. Anyway, he's quickly shot down by British soldiers, and we finally get to the first firearms in the movie. The first weapon we see in the movie, probably the most important weapon in the movie since every single one of the soldiers is using it, is the L85A1 rifle. This assault rifle is a member of the SA-80 family. SA-80 standing for Small Arms for the 1980s, produced by the Royal Small Arms Factory, more commonly known under the name Enfield. The SA-80 family rifles have been the standard rifle for the British Armed Forces since 1985, with the L85A1, the gun in this movie, quickly being swapped for the A2 version because of how unreliable the A1 was, but more on that later. The A1 is a NATO standard 5.56 by 45mm caliber rifle with an effective range of up to about 400 meters or about 1,300 feet. It's a bullpup rifle, as you can see, and it uses 20-round and 30-round magazines, although the 20-round magazines are pretty rare nowadays. Weighs about 5 kilograms or around 11 pounds. The barrel is 20.41 inches long, while the rifle itself is 30.73 inches long. The entire SA-80 family of rifles was designed with the SUSAT optics in mind. SUSAT standing for Sight Universal Small Arms Trialist, and you'll generally never see them without optics. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the A1 version we see in the movie was quickly swapped for the upgraded A2 version for several reasons. The gun first saw combat during the Gulf War, and the soldiers using it reported a plethora of problems. For one, the plastic parts of the gun would damage easily, and it could literally fall apart. Accidentally dropping your own magazine also frequently happened during the Gulf War because of the release catch on the gun. Soldiers had to tape it down to keep it from constantly popping open mid-combat. This sounds like a terrible gun already. But wait, there's more. Remember how I said the magazine can hold 30 rounds? That's just in theory. In practice, the springs in the magazine were so weak, soldiers couldn't load more than 26 to 28 rounds in the magazine. In fact, the magazines would malfunction so often, some soldiers spent more time cleaning their magazines than their actual rifles. If that wasn't enough, the magazine was also very easy to dent if you squeezed it hard enough, which would often result in jams. The gun itself was very difficult to disassemble and reassemble too. The gas plug would jam in place, and you'd need an armorer to remove it. And because of how thin the firing pin was, it would sometimes snap. To top this gun's terrible performance off, I'll mention that dirt could easily accumulate behind the trigger, which would prevent it from firing. So, what does the British Ministry of Defense do with a gun that can't shoot? They order an investigation which finds that the weapon never even passed sand trials, and it frequently jammed during testing. Should never have been accepted into service. This report was actually leaked to the press, and the British MOD claimed it was fake, but they later admitted that it was a real document. The improved A2 version was introduced in 2001, and with that, A1 became history. The second most important weapon of the movie is the L7A2 General Purpose Machine Gun. And in case the machine gun looks familiar, it's because it's a shameless copy of the Belgian FN Mag. I mean, not exactly shameless. They did acquire proper licenses, but still. The gun is pretty much identical to the FN Mag. The caliber is the same, 7.62 by 51mm. The gun is belt-fed. It has a bipod. You can fit it with optical sights. The works. A single belt consists of 100 rounds that are connected to one another with disintegrating belt links. It can effectively suppress troops that are up to 800 meters or 2,600 feet away. But if you put optics on it and mount it, the operator can effectively fire up to 1,800 meters or 6,000 feet away, which is a great weapon to have in a zombie apocalypse. In fact, relative suppression is possible up to 2,500 meters or 8,000 feet away. British troops have, in fact, testified to that in Afghanistan. After decades of proven reliability, the British still use the L7A2 to this day as their primary infantry machine gun. The final weapon we see in the movie is Major West's Browning High Power. This is a very common gun in Hollywood. Axel Foley uses it in Beverly Hills Cop, Al Pacino uses it in Serpico, and of course, Denzel uses it in Man on Fire. This semi-automatic pistol can fire 9mm, 7.65mm, and 40 Smith & Wesson rounds. But the gun that we see in the movie is most definitely using 9mm rounds, as that was the designated sidearm ammo for the British during that period. Today, there are more than 1.5 million pieces worldwide, making it the 12th most popular pistol in the world. Its big brothers, the FN Baby Browning and the FM Model 1910, actually have more than 2 million pieces each in circulation worldwide. The reason this gun was so popular is because of how simple it was. A compact weapon with 10, 13, 15, and 17 round magazines. Robust, but easy to disassemble, clean, and reassemble. And very effective up to 50 meters or 160 feet away. Aside from the UK and Belgium, where it's originally from, the high power was used literally all over the world. Now, southwest is Chile and east is China, with the list of former and current users almost reaching the hundreds. In the United Kingdom, the high power became the primary sidearm in the late 1980s, and it was only phased out in 2013 with the Glock 17 taking over. Those are all the weapons in the movie, and aside from the L85A1, I couldn't complain too much, until I saw the handling. I wouldn't get so mad at the terrible gun handling in this movie if these guys weren't soldiers. They're supposed to be highly trained professionals, not common crooks who have no idea what a firing pin is. But yet, what we see in this movie is about as far from professional as it can get. After taking out Frank when he turns into a zombie, which they did professionally, the next time we see the soldiers in action is when an alarm is rung and they have to defend the base against an incoming horde of infected. Given that the zombies are running over mine-covered terrain, the men have a mounted machine gun, and there's 8 of them with their half-functional L85A1s, it's not surprising that they defend the base with ease. The problem I have with them comes later, after the Major informs Jim that he's fully intending to use Selena and Hannah as sex slaves. Sergeant Farrell rebels against the rest of the group, and a firefight ensues. What really bothers me here is the stance the rest of the men take with their guns. As you can see here, at least 2 of the men surrounding him, and those closest to him, mind you, have their rifles in a low stance. This is absolutely unacceptable from a tactical perspective. And before someone says it in the comments, I know they have him surrounded, but that's no excuse. At that point, having your gun in a high, ready-to-fire stance should be muscle memory. I suppose you could write this off to the movie telling us how relaxed these guys are and how low morale is stooped, but I don't care. This is a major issue that we see throughout the entire movie. At one point, we actually see Corporal Mitchell one-handing his gun, which is absolutely insane. Later on, when Mitchell and Jones are supposed to execute Jim and Farrell, Jones fires from the hip, and if that's not enough, he fires without warning Mitchell first. This directly leads to Jim escaping because the sudden burst of fire shocked Mitchell and scared him, and he reacted by shoving Jones, which gave Jim a moment to escape. Even Major West holds his L-85 in a low stance, for crying out loud. I have no idea what's wrong with this unit, but it seems like everyone's got the gun handling skills of someone who's seen too many action movies, but they never fired a gun in their life. Jim, who really is a person who's never fired a gun before, actually holds the L-85 better. At least he fixed the stock in his shoulder. Jones is most definitely the worst soldier of the bunch. No wonder they put him on kitchen duty. He's completely useless with a gun. This is his shooting technique when faced with two zombies. That's right, eyes closed, waving the gun around like a maniac, doing nothing more than blowing a few holes in the ceiling. Look, I know that these guys are depressed beyond all reason, and they haven't had proper human contact in a month, but they're trained men. There is absolutely no excuse for this sort of gun handling. The only thing I can actually compliment in this movie is Mitchell's trigger discipline, which I happen to spot. One final criticism I have is that of Major Jones having a clear shot on Jim and shooting him in the gut. He wants to kill him. Why not shoot him in the head? The chest? Anywhere but the gut, which is statistically the second best place to get shot in terms of survivability, after the arms and the legs, of course. Maybe the reason this unit sucks is because its commander sucks. It might be worth looking into. I love 28 Days Later. It's one of my favorite horror movies, and I think it was beautifully made. And I still love it, despite all of these grievous mistakes. However, as it's the nature of these unserious soldiers to wave their guns like complete idiots, it's the nature of this channel to call it out. When it comes to firearm accuracy, it's a 10 out of 10. I mean, there are only 3 firearms in the entire movie, and that didn't leave the production with a whole lot they could mess up. And all the guns are era-accurate weapons used by the British military at the time of filming. When it comes to the accuracy of firearms handling, this is probably the worst gun handling in any horror movie ever. And by soldiers, no less. I have to give it a 0. It'd be unfair to other movies if I didn't. I just can't accept that soldiers and a high-ranking officer would act so unprofessionally with their firearms. And it doesn't matter how long they spent in isolation and how depressed they are. Anyone who's been in the military will testify that weapons handling is drilled into you during basic combat training to the point it becomes muscle memory, which makes these sins entirely unforgivable. I think we'll have much more fun with 28 Weeks Later, though. I know it's not as good as the first one, but it's still a good movie, and it has a lot more guns in it. Did you see 28 Years Later yet? Did you like it? And which movie do you want to see broken down for firearms realism next? Another horror movie? Leave your suggestion down below, and see you next time.